Hi everybody, I'm Bev Laidlaw, PCS Deputy President and also Chair of the National Disabled Members Forum. So welcome tonight everybody. I just first of all, before we get started, introduce Richard Law. He's providing our BSL interpretation tonight, and we're also broadcasting on PCSX, on Facebook Live and our YouTube pages. So please give us a shout out if you're from a certain branch. Let us know where you're listening from and watching from, and also share this on your Facebook Live, on your X as well, so we can get as many people watching tonight as possible. So again, welcome to the event. The event is today from our forum, and the aim is to raise awareness, look at positive stories of neurodiversity in the workplace, personal stories that you'll hear from colleagues and members of PCS, but also myth bust some of those things that we know that goes on in our workplaces, and acknowledge the neurodiversity during this Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is the 17th to the 23rd of March. The theme tonight is Celebrate, Learn and Empower. We'll hear from a range of speakers tonight about neurodiversity. You can access the closed captions from the platform that you're on if you're required those. What we will also have is the PCS harassment protocol. There will be a link in the comments page shortly, because while we're on a PCS live event, obviously we want to make sure this is a safe space for everybody to adhere to. So the team behind the scene here will post different things on our comments channel. So please ask any questions as you go along and they'll forward them to me. So what we're going to be doing tonight is also a little bit different. So hopefully you'll stay with us, enjoy it, and come into more events that we put on in the future for the National Disabled Members Forum. So what we're going to do first of all is hear from Janine Booth. Janine Booth runs a neurodiversity training program for PCS, a former railway worker, an RMT NEC member. She now runs Red in the Spectrum, which provides neurodiversity training and organising support for different trade unions. And I've known Janine for quite a long time, and some of you that have gone on some of her courses, which we'll discuss later on in the presentation. So hopefully this will be a really good point to start off our meeting tonight. So welcome, Janine, and over to you to bust some of those myths.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I do love busting a few myths. So actually, you know what? I've got a list of 16 of them. But there's probably more than that. So after every 4, I'm going to ask if anyone watching this wants to raise any myths that they want busting or confirming, because it might not be a myth. You never know. So do post it as a comment, and Bev will read out any that come up. But here we go. Here's my list anyway. Myth number 1: everybody's got a disorder these days. Okay, so you now hear these days, you hear a lot of people saying ADHD is being overdiagnosed, autism is being overdiagnosed. It's like everyone's got a disorder these days, and this is the kind of the logical conclusion of that attitude. Could be seen in what the government announced yesterday about restricting access to disability benefits. It plays into this idea that people are just faking it. People are, getting themselves a label for something that's not really a big deal at all. Now, actually, on the one hand, I would say we are over pathologizing naturally occurring neurological differences. Okay. So I'd rather not even think of it as a diagnosis at all. I'm autistic. I'm ADHD. I don't think that means there's anything wrong with me. I think it means I think and behave noticeably differently from neurotypical people. But in the society we live in, which expects everybody to be normal and is hostile to people who aren't, you have huge problems. And if you seek recognition of those and help with those, then that is fair enough. And it's not just about everyone's got a disorder these days. It's about addressing people's genuine needs. So that's my myth number 1. Myth number 2, linked to that: ADHD is just an excuse for bad or antisocial behaviour. Now, I've no doubt there are some people who, Exhibit A, Elon Musk. Exhibit B, Kanye West. who both appear to think that being autistic is an excuse for their terrible behavior. But actually, no, Elon, being autistic does not make you do Nazi salutes. And no, Kanye, being autistic does not make you an anti-Semite. Being neurodivergent is not an excuse for being a bit of a tosser. If you're a bit of a tosser, you're just a bit of a tosser, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. But actually, people tend to say this if something like, do you know what? If a worker who's ADHD can't sit still and concentrate through the whole duration of a 4-hour-long boring meeting, and maybe they fidget, and maybe they disturb other people, and people think that's antisocial behaviour. Maybe the problem isn't the ADHD. Maybe the problem is the 4-hour-long boring meeting. So when people do misbehave, if an autistic person has a meltdown, something like that, rather than just saying they're using as an excuse for bad behaviour, have a think about what it is around them that's provoked that behaviour in the first place. Okay. Myth number 3. It's a tragedy for your family when your child turns out to be neurodivergent. Believe me, there's an entire charity industry in the United States that is based on this. So there's an American charity called Autism Speaks. I don't know why it's called Autism Speaks, because it doesn't actually let autistic people speak. What it does is it speaks about us rather than amplifying us. And they very much promote this tragedy narrative as though it's the worst thing possible for your family if your kid turns out to be autistic or otherwise neurodivergent. Personally, I don't think it is. So I have 3 kids. They're all grown up now. They are all neurodivergent. One's ADHD, 2 are autistic. And it has brought to me and my life experience and my family, I think it's enriched us. It hasn't half come with problems, like constantly having to fight for your rights and fight for your kids, and it's like being your kid's union rep half the time. Okay, but that's not because of the autism or the ADHD. That's because of disadvantage and discrimination in society. So it's not a tragedy when your kid turns out to be autistic or ADHD or anything else. I've got into the habit of when someone says, I've been diagnosed autistic or I've been diagnosed ADHD, etc., of saying congratulations. Because actually finding out who you are and how your brain works is a really potentially very liberatory thing. And also because I know that most people they tell won't say congratulations. They'll say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Myth number 4 I've got here is some autistic people are high functioning and some are low functioning. Now you hear that quite a lot, and it's not really a helpful way of looking at things, okay? Because as lots of people know, autism is a spectrum. But the spectrum is not a straight line from mild to severe. Okay, it's not that some people are a little bit autistic and other people are very autistic. Every autistic person is autistic. Now, certainly, some people have higher support needs than others. That is a better way to describe it than about being high functioning or low functioning, because a whole person generally doesn't fit neatly into either of those. Autistic people often have what we call a spiky functional profile, where you can be simultaneously high functioning in some areas of your life and low functioning in other areas of your life, or high functioning on one day and low functioning on the next day, for instance. So it doesn't make sense to describe the whole person as either high or low functioning. So to give an example, which is a particularly cliched stereotype of an autistic person, say you have an autistic person who is a maths genius, okay, to the extent that they are a professor at a university, but they cannot get up, get dressed, get out of the house and get to work in time to deliver their lectures without someone to help them do it. Now, is that person high functioning or low functioning? Doesn't make sense, does it? They're neither, they're a bit of one, they're a bit of the other. So it's better to think about people in terms of their individual profiles and needs rather than to describe a whole person as high functioning or low functioning. Because if we label someone as low functioning, then their strengths are overlooked. And if we label them high functioning, then their needs get overlooked. That's the first 4. So it's time to ask whether we've got any others in the comments.
I haven't got any questions yet come through for you, Janine. I'd go to the next couple of ones, and if there is any more, I'll come back in.
Okay, so we'll do the next batch of 4. And myth number 5, dyscalculic people are of low intelligence. So for those of you who haven't come across dyscalculia before, it's a little bit simplistic to call it dyslexia with numbers. But it is, that's not a bad place to start, actually, if it's new to you. Dyscalculic people tend to have similar difficulties with numbers and number concepts that dyslexic people have with the written word. However, dyscalculic people and dyslexic people and autistic people, etc., have the same range of intelligence as neurotypical people. Okay, so this is where I get to explain the difference between learning disability and specific learning difficulty. Okay, they are 2 separate things. Learning disability is a condition that does impact on intelligence. A specific learning disability is something that's characterized by having problems with a certain area of learning, like numbers for dyscalculic people, the written word for dyslexic people, but doesn't have an impact overall on intelligence. Okay, number 6. Myth number 6. Neurodivergent conditions mainly affect men. Oh, this is a hot potato, this one. So the statistics will tell you that this is true. Okay, so the statistics will say that significantly more men and boys are diagnosed as, this is particularly true of autism and ADHD, are diagnosed with autism and ADHD than girls and women. However, I think we need to pick that apart and realize that doesn't necessarily mean that more men and boys are autistic or ADHD than girls or women. It may well be, I think it's very likely that it is, that the current diagnostic criteria and processes that we use are geared more to finding neurodivergence in males than in females. Okay, so what's my evidence for this? Statistics used to show that I think the ratio of boys and men to girls and women with dyslexia was 9-2, and now it's down to like 5-2. So the very fact that that gap is closing strongly suggests that's actually what's happening is society is gradually beginning to recognize it in girls and women more than it did before. And I think what's happening here is women are much likely to be later diagnosed. So I think the average age for identification of autistic girls is 11 and for boys is 5. It's something like that. So if you took a snapshot of 8-year-olds, you'd capture most of the boys, but only a minority of the girls. Girls and women are much more likely to be misdiagnosed with other things before getting the correct diagnosis of neurodivergence. So there you go. That's your number 5. No, that was your number 6, wasn't it? Oh, number 7. I like number 7. Autistic people are weirdos with no social skills. Apologies for the abusive language there, but people do say this kind of thing, okay? As though being weird is somehow really bad, because wouldn't it be brilliant, apparently, if everyone in the world was exactly the same and no one was different at all? Well, weird is such a pejorative and insulting word. But also this idea of no social skills. This is quite interesting. A lot of people would agree that autistic people lack social skills. But social skills, social interaction, by definition, involves at least 2 people. Okay? So when it breaks down between people. And yet in our society, only one of the people gets blamed, and it's the person who's the minority. So if an autistic person and a non-autistic person are having trouble socially interacting with each other, they fall out, row, misunderstand, can't communicate, whatever, okay, then that problem has arisen between them. And yet our society would generally say the autistic person lacks social skills. But surely the non-autistic person equally lacks the social skills necessary to interact with the autistic person. You'd think, wouldn't you? Okay, and number 8. Myth number 8. Once you have met one dyspraxic person, you know what dyspraxic people are like. Well, you don't, because do you know what? Us neurodivergent people, we're not just different from neurotypicals, we're also different from each other, including from other people with exactly the same diagnosis as us. So again, don't, and managers, employers can be a bit of a problem like this. You might be a union rep and you might go and see them with a member who's just been diagnosed as being autistic or something. You go to your manager and say, I just want to talk about, what adjustments, what support this person might need, etc. And they go, oh yeah, autism. Ah, yes, I know all about that. My neighbour's second cousin's aunt's stepdaughter's friend had that. But your member, your workmate, may well be very, very different from that person. Okay, Bev, have we got any more?
We do actually. We've got one question from H Sheridan, which is, can I ask you, how do you feel? I'm not sorry about my language because I'm dyslexic, so sometimes reading questions is an issue for me. But how do you feel about pathologizing autism and other ND conditions, as in presenting it as a disorder or a defect?
I strongly dislike that. I think there's a real problem about pathologizing naturally occurring differences in human brain structure. For example, right, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I mean, that's a hell of an achievement to fit that many negative terms into one diagnostic label, a diagnostic label which, it's a bit more complicated than this, but in essence just means your attention span comes in shorter, more intense bursts than other people's. So one of the things we really need to be fighting is this idea that there's something wrong with you. One of the things also that another facet of this pathologizing is the lack of popular knowledge of the strengths associated with certain minority neurotypes. So, for instance, dyslexic people struggle with reading, writing, and spelling, particularly in English, because English is such a crazy language. However, it's also been established by the scientific boffins that dyslexic people have significantly enhanced spatial reasoning ability. So that's the ability to think in 3D. Okay, it's why some of the world's most successful, renowned architects are dyslexic. Richard Rogers, Norman Foster. Buildings around the world, from the Pompidou Centre to the Sydney Opera House, designed by dyslexics. Okay, and they're great architects, not despite being dyslexic, but because they're dyslexic. But if you went and stood out on your street and asked the next 100 people who went past what they could tell you about dyslexia, probably 99 of them would be able to tell you about the troubles with reading and writing and spelling. You'd be lucky if any of them knew the thing about enhanced spatial reasoning. And of course, we still call it dyslexia. We don't call it enhanced spatial reasoning syndrome. Maybe in future we will. Bev, how am I doing for time?
Yeah, well, we've only got about a minute or so left. So I thought what we'll do now is, what I'll do is just say a couple of things from some of the things on the comments. So, for example, other myths that people have come up with. So David from MOJ South Yorkshire, he says a myth is someone that he's heard is around that neurodiverse can be cured. Obviously, that's one that goes out there a lot. And also Louise from Leith in Edinburgh branch, we can all draw fantastic 3D pictures if we're neurodiverse. And also it's a middle class affliction. So this is some of the things that obviously some of our myths, some of our people watching can do. So hopefully you can stay on, Janine. What we're going to do now, though, is move on to the next item. Bear with me 1 second. Just get back into that. So what we're going to do now is bring you back in a little while, Janine, for our panel discussion, if that's all right. And so what we're going to do for this section is actually move over. And what we have is we have a member, April, on the event, and she's going to share her personal experiences with us in a bit of a conversation with me. And April has worked for the civil service and previously worked for ACAS as a conciliator before transferring to MOD. So really welcome, and thank you so much, April, for coming on and sharing your story with us. And obviously what we thought we'd do is just break it down to a few sections. So because yours is a really good news story, I think is what we'll do, is we'll start off with just this conversation with me and you on the screen, and Richard interpreting for us. So what neurodiverse conditions do you have, April?
So I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and I also have Erland syndrome. I was diagnosed with both dyslexia and dyspraxia when I was 36 years old. So again, with Janine's statement that we're often later diagnosed completely fits in with that. And although my diagnostic report mentioned Erland syndrome, I wasn't officially diagnosed with until I was 44.
Cool. So how do those conditions affect you?
So I always thought that, and this plays into some of what Janine was talking about, is people's understanding, general public's understanding of how dyslexia and how these conditions affect people. Dyslexia, I always thought, previously to before I suspected that I had dyslexia, that is, that dyslexia meant that you were only poor at spelling, and I had never even heard of dyspraxia or Erland syndrome. I won spelling bees at school, so I couldn't possibly have dyslexia, right? That's what I thought before I suspected and about my dyslexia and things, before I educated myself a bit more. Um, Now, for those of you that don't know dyspraxia, or don't know what dyspraxia is, it's which is also referred to as developmental coordination disorder (DCD). Primarily, it affects my motor skills and movements, or I should say other people's as well. People that have that diagnosis. Um, Dyspraxia can cause difficulty with fine motor skills, as well as gross motor skills, so that's small and large movements. It can be one or the other or both in a single individual. Um, Dyspraxia can affect lots of other things, including organization and the person's ability to control the volume of their voice. Erland syndrome primarily presents as light sensitivity and can also be referred to as scotopic sensitivity. And like all of these conditions, there is a spectrum for that, and it varies from person to person. And mine is quite severe, hence the tinted lenses. These are specially tinted from Erlen East, and I had to have them sent away to have the correct spectrum tint put in for my specific needs. My neurodiversity, to shorten that, I'm sorry, I'm such long-winded, but my neurodiversity affects every aspect of my life. How I move, how I talk, always wearing tinted lenses and sunglasses, unless I'm in the really preferable lighting. It's getting to that point, but because I have the screens, it would be too bright for me to take off I can take off the hat now that the sun's gone down, but I can't have no lenses.
Thanks ever so much for that, April. So with some of those,
I'm sorry. I wasn't. Sorry. It affects me. I avoided reading most of my life unless I needed to. I was very slow. I was a very slow reader. My comprehension was terrible. I even used to avoid administrative types of jobs, focusing on manual jobs. Lots changed for me in the early 2000s after I had my children, and I didn't want them to have my same reading difficulties, not knowing at the time when I had them that I didn't even suspect that I had dyslexia at that time. So I spent more time reading, and started reading to them, and then it branched off from there. I am excessively chatty, as you probably are witnessing right now. I sometimes lack a filter or recognize social cues and boundaries. When I've missed a social cue or breached a boundary, I might feel that awkwardness. But me being me, I try to fix it, but with more talking, not really realizing that it's the excessive talking that may be what is causing that awkwardness between me and the other person. I make what seem like random connections all the time with music lyrics, film and telly quotes, and when the lyrics or quotes reflect something that is happening in my day, I impulsively blurt it out. And I also interrupt people whilst they are talking. I try not to, but sometimes I just can't help myself. And that's pretty much, sorry, that's me. I'm done with that question.
Cheers, thank you. So obviously we'll go on to talk further about how you dealt with your issues that you had at the workplace. But what are some of the experiences you had with your conditions in the workplace?
Okay. Do you mind if I flip that around and start with my most recent experience? Because I
Yes.
don't know if we'll have time then the other way around. And that way I can
Okay.
kind of summarize the other stuff. Um, so in my most recent employment, as it was included in my introduction, um, I I took the MOD to an employment tribunal. My claim had 30 listed incidents, plus multiple failures to make reasonable adjustments. I was successful with many counts of disability discrimination. I'm waiting for the judgment to be published on the .gov website to confirm the exact number. Based on the judge's oral judgment, they found multiple counts of discrimination arising from disability, multiple counts of failure to make reasonable adjustments, and the judge also found harassment.
Cheers. So, Ray, so that was the outcome, which I think is a really good outcome. But obviously, it's not easy raising those issues in the workplace.
No.
It's not easy taking things to a tribunal. What barriers did you face along that road?
Well, first of all, just my nature was part of it. I have a innate nature to avoid. I don't like conflict. I avoid conflict, but I got to a point where I felt like I had no other choice but to face it head on. And I came to the conclusion that a um, a conflict avoided is really just especially in this sorts of situations is really just a problem delayed. You'll have to end up facing it eventually. That's my belief. From my own personal experiences, I wouldn't try to say what other people should or shouldn't do. One of the things that helped me, and I think is actually really, really important, is I disclosed my neurodiversity to pretty much everyone. It was in my email signature. One thing is for sure, nobody that interacted with me could claim that they didn't know that I had these conditions. Again, each individual needs to make up their mind for what suits them best, but this is this is the reality. If there are three reasons that I believe disclosure is so important. One is to allow the manager to engage with you, to remove barriers in your workplace. The second is awareness, promoting an inclusive environment. And the third is to provide yourself with protection should things go wrong. In my case, they had. Um, should you ever find yourself in a situation where your only steps forward are to progress to a tribunal or to escape the work environment. And should you choose to progress to a tribunal, one of the first legal tests applied to any disability case is, did the person slash employer know of your condition, or was it reasonable for the person or employer to know that you had the condition at the time of the incident? And if the answer to those questions is no, then you're unlikely to succeed with your claim. And that's where the part of the giving yourself that protection. It is making yourself vulnerable though in the workplace, but in my own experiences, um, it often, whether you have make people aware of your differences or not, and as Janine had pointed out, people know that you have differences, that you are different. They recognize it in you. They see that. I mean, my excessive chatting and things like that. I'm different. I'm not like every other person around them, especially if they surround themselves with neurotypical people, then they wouldn't necessarily encounter people like me, or they might inadvertently avoid people like me. And in my experience, that is a fundamental difference. And one of the yeah, it's such a huge vulnerability, but a protection that you can give yourself in the workplace, and that's been my findings. Also, the tribunal experience. I think this answer like continues to answer your question as well. Is the tribunal experience wasn't what I expected. I thought that the cross examination for me as the claimant was going to be questioning about the series of events to see if my story changed and stuff like that. But it was very adversarial and felt like a further violation. It was hard to go through. It was like going through it all over. Well, it was. I was reliving it and everything. So I had the 3 full days of cross-examination, which was essentially 3 days of being bullied by the respondent's barrister, where they would say things like, "You say XYZ happened, but that didn't happen, did it?" It's essentially implying that I was lying, misrepresenting fact, or even remembering inaccurately. And the closing statements of the respondent's barrister was even worse. What they said caused me to sob for off and on for days. It was a really bad situation. It was really difficult to deal with and cope with mentally, emotionally. It was overwhelming. And I'm not saying any of this to discourage anybody. I'm saying it because I wish I'd known before I had gone down that route, just so that when so I knew what to prepare mentally and fit, like emotionally, how to build up your barriers and to go into that fight, essentially, because that's what you're doing. You are going into a fight, especially if they're defending it at tribunal. That's what's happening. You are fighting for the believe the and to have be treated fairly. And yeah, it was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. I've got a lot of hard things.
And I think it's amazing that you struggled on as long as you did, April. And I think it's an amazing outcome that hopefully, obviously you'll go into remedy later. But hopefully that will be in the public domain, that judgment soon. And hopefully that will support hundreds, if not so many more members when they're taking their cases forward, that they can state, well, actually, look at this case. This is what it is. And that's what I think we need to remind everybody. And again, thank you so much for one, coming on here and telling your story.
Yeah.
But two, one of the biggest things is that tribunal. Although you have reps to support you along the way, I do think it is one of those things that it isn't an easy thing to do.
No.
But it's the right thing to do. So again, thank you so much for doing that.
No, you're welcome. And I did feel a moral obligation to do it as well. And my rep was amazing, always there when I needed him. He was brilliant. And I know he's actually listening to this, so I feel kind of I'm trying not to. I don't know how he is with compliments, but but it's true. He was phenomenal and has been and still is. He's still working with me and getting help and support me with returning to work and things. So to go back to some of my previous experiences, and I haven't always had doom and gloom experiences. I've had good experiences with things, and key factors have always been whether my manager has been a good manager or a bad manager. I've had a manager that said didn't like me right from the beginning and took steps to manage me out of the organization. They even had one of my colleagues, they told them to go out and go to our stakeholders, go to our customers, and dig up some dirt on her. And he went out and he ended up running into me, and he told me what she had him do. And I was like, yeah. And he went, yeah, I'm so excited because I get to go back and tell her what I found. And I said, what'd you find? And he said, I've had nothing but compliments about you. And he was like, I can't wait to ruin her day. That kind of thing. So it was very much but that was what I was facing. And then eventually I was managed out of that organization through redundancy. Different manager. That manager thankfully had gone, but I had multiple managers while I was there. Some of them were really good and supportive. And again, this is before I had my diagnosis. I didn't know, but whilst I was working there, I did actually suspect and I took the British Dyslexia Association indicator test and found out that I was highly likely to have dyslexia. And they refused to pay for that. Even though they were a large organization. And I then, because they said my tasks, because I was in maintenance, that my tasks were like less than 10, my administrative tasks, there was less than 10%, they said, so they wouldn't fund my dyslexia assessment. But when they but they said they would accept the indicator test as a diagnosis. And when I was managed out for redundancy, there were some factors that they decided to rate me down. They gave me lower scores for which were taking too long to fill in forms, talking too loudly in the office, being disruptive, and they also said that I filled in the accident book too frequently. Again, all of these are linked to my disabilities. Dyspraxia, I'm clumsy as anything. I bump into things when I'm standing still. I bump into doors. And then I'm also the classic, I know I'm not originally British, but just like the Brits that we're always polite, always say sorry to the door for the inanimate object.
And thanks ever so much for that, April. What we're going to do now, so sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
But what we're going to do now, everybody, is we thought what we'll do is have a bit of a panel session. So April's going to stay with us. Janine's with us as well. And also I've now got Sarah with us as well. So Sarah has been a PCS rep for around 10 years. She's branch chair in DWP Liverpool branch and also serves as a group assistant secretary on the DWP GC. She's also a member of the NEC. She is neurodivergent and has a physical and mental health disability, and she's part of our Disabled Forum family. And so what we thought we'd do is we've got a few questions that have come through already. And so what I thought I'd do is just sort of like put some of these questions to you guys, and we can have a bit of a chat about what we think they are. So the first one's a bit controversial, actually. So we do have around... let's see how long. We've got 10 minutes on these questions. So again, if you're watching on any of our platforms, please share. If you've got any questions or any comments about what we're talking about, please put them in the comment section so we can do that. So the first question is changed a little bit because of the news over the last 24 hours, 48 hours. So the first question is to all of you, and I'll come to you one at a time, is with the Labour government wanting more disabled people returning to the workplace, as we've all heard with the cuts to the welfare bill that they've announced, how could a more accessible society, including workplaces and public transport, and a better understanding of disability benefit disabled people? So how could it benefit disabled people around the making society more accessible? So what I'll do is Janine, would you want to come in first?
Yeah, no problem. I think the key approach on this question is the social model of disability. Now, you may or may not have heard of this. If you've been on the courses I run, you definitely will have done. But the traditional way of that society looks at disability is by looking at disabled people and going, oh, something wrong with you, so it needs fixing. What a social model of disability approach does is it says, okay, some people have impairments, shortfalls in functioning, whatever. Some people have differences. But what disables us is barriers in society. And not only is that more progressive, in my view, but it's also much more practical because it doesn't rely on trying to fix you. What it does is say, identify barriers and remove barriers. So one of the things that strikes me about the government's attempts to get disabled people to work, I'm sure there's £1 billion to help give disabled people employment support. That's, better than nothing, isn't it? But the rest of the package that came out yesterday, it's all about, it's like shoving disabled people into work at the threat of impoverishing or starving you if you don't take up a job which may be completely inappropriate for you. And when you look at what they say about, so from a social model approach, what you'd say is, well, what are the barriers to people getting jobs? And let's remove those barriers. So, but there's the lack of legal compulsion on employers to make jobs accessible is amazing. I'm glad they're getting rid of the work capability assessment. What they should do is they should replace it with a workplace accessibility assessment and make employers jobs accessible. But in the meantime, it's carrots for employers and sticks for us, and that's not good enough.
Cool. Sarah, anything to add? You're on mute.
I completely agree with what Janine said there. I think our major issue is we've got, like, I work in DWP, and we are a disability confident employer, disability exemplar employer, and we've got all these tags that everyone can put on their email signature and that we can put on web pages and stuff. But I represent our members, and I'm currently representing a disability employment advisor whose job it is to go and tell people, no, there is legislation to protect you and you are entitled to go out and request these reasonable adjustments. And she's having problems getting her own reasonable adjustments implemented in her own workplace. And so that sort of shows you that I think in the civil service, there's a lot of, this is how we want to appear, but that does not translate, that does not get down to the shop floor. And what we've got is a lot of line managers with no sort of concept of how to support neurodivergent people. And I'm still doing courses where a lot of what April said rang true as well. Like I'm still representing members because people don't like their behaviour, because their behaviour doesn't mirror their own. And it's like, oh God, sorry, is all little neurodivergent brains making you feel a bit uncomfortable because I don't want to talk about what happened in Coronation Street last night while we're standing at the printer. I'm happy to just stand at the printer in silence. And so it's things like this, and then that can then form an opinion of someone, and this can lead to disciplinary action. Because if you are not sort of the presenters the same as the neurotypical people on your team, it can lead to problems, and all of this is very traumatic for neurodivergent people in the workplace. So I think we definitely, with the social model of disability, but we've still got so much work on the ground to do regarding myth busting and acceptance, and in getting people to just accept that we're not all the same, and that we have got amazing things to bring to the workplace, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to mask all the time to make those people feel comfortable so we look the same as everybody else. I think that's where we need to do the work. Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Sarah. April, anything in the last minute or two on this question?
No, it's very much in line with them. I had one job where it was really lovely right from the start. I did disclosed my manager, even though they weren't working on the site, they always got my adjustments that I requested in place. They had some of my assistive software in place before I arrived. My colleagues, although they didn't know much about my disabilities, but they were willing to learn, and because I was open with them and that we discussed things, and I told them how it affected me, and they actually helped remove barriers and support me in the workplace. And that was a lovely work environment. And that's what we strive for, we hope for. But then there's other experiences that I've had similar, and where people don't even know why they don't like you. They just don't like you because you're different, and they just know that you're not like them or like the people that they are closest to. And if we could break down that like where people accepted, like as Sarah was saying, if we could get more of the acceptance and willing to learn and actually raising more awareness, because I had situations where there was preconceptions and assumptions that were made about me, and that actually led to part of the judge's decisions, actually, because there were things and where it kind of creates that hostile environment.
So before I move on to the next segment, what I'd really like from all three of you is just, if you could sum it up, and I know this is really hard for me and other people, is if you had one sentence of advice that you would give to others that are struggling in the workplace, what one sentence would you say to them? So April first, we'll go in reverse order.
I would say to use the ACAS website, learn your rights and the law. They actually have new things there for the neurodiversity, and actually they're to give guidance to employers. And don't allow the situation to deteriorate and continue to worsen because you're afraid of how you might be perceived. Always send follow-up emails to verbal conversations with read receipts.
Yes,
And Definitely that one, and file subject access requests, especially for third parties, and disclose your neurodiversity.
Thank you.
I know it's difficult to make yourself vulnerable like that, but that's my guidance and advice.
Thank you. Sarah, quick advice?
Don't be afraid to advocate yourself for yourself from the get-go. Advocate for yourself. If you are not confident in doing that, get a rep or a colleague, but sort of start as you mean to go on.
Cheers, thanks. Janine?
Yeah, get involved in your trade union and take up the issue collectively, not just individually.
Thanks, Janine. I think that's really important, isn't it, to make sure that all of our policies, procedures are equality proof, to make sure that actually they are fit for purpose. Every single one of our policies and procedures, I think, would be really good. So at this point, I really want to say thank you to April and Janine for coming on today. It's been absolutely brilliant, both of your segments. So we're going to say goodbye to you, but hopefully not for too long. We will hopefully all stay in touch. So Sarah's going to stay on with me. And so this is where me and Sarah are going to have a bit of a chat and hopefully just have a little bit of a learn. So I'm going to get my coffee at the same time here. So obviously I've already introduced you to Sarah, but obviously Sarah's got her own story as well. And I think it's really good for us to talk about that as well, especially myself being a woman of a certain age with a neurodivergent condition. And so Sarah, do you want to talk about your diagnosis of ADHD, but also around the menopause and how it affected you, especially as women?
Thanks, Bev. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was nearly 50, and it became, I would say, really apparent that there was something there that wasn't just anxiety or my fibromyalgia and one of the other myriads of conditions I've been diagnosed with. And when I started to look into it, I realized that women being diagnosed with ADHD during or as they go into perimenopause is actually a lot more common than you would think. It's quite difficult to get accurate stats on it, and because of the issues with diagnosis, and the issues with diagnosis come from the same misogynistic place that a lot of things do, and this is because women tend, or when the young girls don't present in the same way as little boys do. I think Janine mentioned earlier on the stereotype around ADHD, where it's like little boys bouncing off the walls, maybe having a tantrum, this type of thing. And with women and girls, the most common type to be diagnosed with is inattentive. So this means it's all internal. The hyperactivity is all in your brain. So you can be looking at someone who can be like a vision of peace, but what's going on inside their head is like screaming loud noise all the time, quite often self-berating. So what, like the biology part of it is apparently when we enter perimenopause, our estrogen levels drop. And estrogen helps us produce dopamine, and dopamine is something that we lack very much in ADHD, and this is how this has come about. Now we're seeing a lot more women diagnosed during menopause, and the problem with this is, like myself, I mentioned I've been diagnosed with a number of conditions, a lot of them central nervous system related, such as fibromyalgia. I've got a couple of autoimmune conditions, and my GP and the psychologist who initially diagnosed me, we both all believe that the reason I have things like fibromyalgia and those type of chronic illnesses is through living with undiagnosed ADHD for all my life, because the masking that we do, and when we talk about masking, we're talking about the face we put on to make it that, and this is something neurodivergent people do, although we are trying to sort of move away from that, but it's the face that you put on for the situation that you're in. So from childhood, girls laying out a mask anyway because of societal pressures on the way we're expected to behave, but we will present ourselves in a way that is palatable for those around us. So I was nearly 50 and I realised I've got about 10 different Sarahs here. I've got Sarah who is in work. I've got Sarah the union rep. I've got Sarah the mum. I've got Sarah the daughter, Sarah the friend, and all of those Sarahs were different depending on the situation that I was in. And as you look into it more, this is you trying to fit in. So growing up with no idea that you've actually got a neurological condition, you are just trying to get through your life by not standing out for anything negative. So you can sort of get wrapped up in this, but the toll that this takes on you emotionally, psychologically, and physically will cause these type of conditions such as fibromyalgia. Many people with ADHD have comorbid conditions such as generalized anxiety disorder. And again, this often comes from the trauma of living with ADHD undiagnosed. The research has shown that a child with ADHD will receive on average 10,000 negative sort of verbal experiences before they reach the age of 12. So that will be down to behaviours. So in my case, it will be why you're daydreaming. I've just told you that. Why do I need to tell you again? You've forgotten this again. You've forgotten this again. And it's all those type of things that you eventually you build up all these strategies to try and cope with all that, and then you move into perimenopause and it all comes crashing down and you've got no idea why your brain won't do what it used to do. I used to be able to spin all the plates. I've got a ridiculous number of roles in the union and my mum and everything, and I could do all this. And then all of a sudden I couldn't. So it comes as quite a shock. And there's a bit of a grief period as well when you are diagnosed late, because you also have to consider the mum that you might have been if you'd have had support and because you'd known about the condition, the career you might have had, all these type of things, because all your energy is being put into masking and trying to manage this condition that you don't even know you've got, and keep all your plate spinning so that nobody knows.
I think it's really important, isn't it? Because obviously, as myself going through menopause as well, or it's very much a case of you think that your personality is changing. As you said, you have different personalities. And so it's very much a case of you go, well, is this normal? Because a lot of people still don't even talk about menopause, let alone menopause actually then, as you said, bringing to light other conditions that you may have. So was there anything specific, do you think, that you sat there and thought, I need to go and see what this is? Was there a certain clicking moment for you?
Yes, because a lot of the, like what we call, what are traits, basically, like I really struggle with task initiation. So I can have a project or report I've got to write, and I can know about that 6 months in advance. And then the week before, I'll start getting a bit anxious, but I couldn't possibly start it with a week to go. And then it's like my brain won't let me start it until I am in overwhelming anxiety mode. And then I get a bit of an adrenaline kicks in. And it's the fight or flight. And it's that enables me to write the report. Now, if we lived if I was born in caveman times or something, and I was at risk of predators trying to eat me alive, this was obviously really useful, this hypervigilance. But for the sake of writing an email or writing a report, it takes a big toll on your body. So the task initiation got much worse when I went into perimenopause. The brain fog got much worse when I went into perimenopause. Like, for things like this, in the past, I could do these sort of just off the cuff, and I used to be able to do that, to speak at meetings and go into meetings, and I would just be able to sort of like freestyle it. But now I have to have notes. I have to have notes for absolutely everything, because my brain can just go completely blank, and there's words I can't remember. I constantly lose things. I forget about bill payments, no matter what strategies I tried to put in place. I've also got, like, there's problems with online shopping and things like that, all these things that you do to activate your reward center in your brain because the dopamine is down. So you start trying to generate it in unhealthy ways. I know a lot of women in this situation have problems with online gambling and things like that because it's something that you just want that hit of dopamine, and you get it from something like that. So we've got sort of all these women who are suffering all this in silence and being told, oh, it's because of your menopause. And then, as you said, Bev, menopause is still ridiculously a very taboo subject. And when you've got like perimenopause and fibromyalgia, everything I had was blamed on those, but I knew there was something else. And it was only after it was a conversation about procrastination I had with a psychologist that I was actually seeing over like an eating disorder. And as we got sort of further into it, she said that's not actually procrastination, that is executive functioning skills. There's a lack there. And it was because she knew me, because we'd had lots of chats. It was her who said, she said, I think you should really pursue an ADHD diagnosis. And I mean, I've got a son. My son was diagnosed with autism when he was 11. And we are very, very similar. Still, I didn't see it. I didn't see the connections. Like the bits that I now know are blatant neurodivergent traits. I just thought, oh, he just takes after me. He takes after me. He's a bit scatty, or he takes after me. And again, with things like I mentioned when I first started talking about the misogynistic aspect of it all as well in women's healthcare, women's healthcare, women are much less likely to receive diagnoses of anything like this, and because often these traits are put down to our female sensibilities and sensitivities, and we're told, oh no, this is just part of being a woman, you've got to crack on with it. But we know that a lot of menstrual health conditions run comorbid with ADHD, so PMDD, endometriosis, which I also have, and the ADHD can exacerbate these conditions. Like people with PMDD, for example, can 2 to 3 weeks of every month for them is absolute mental health hell. And this is also really common with ADHD. So it can be hard to pin it down and to get your medical professionals to take you seriously, because there's so many other things that can be blamed on it, and the diagnosis process itself is very stressful. I think the current average waiting time is 12 to 18 months through Right to Choose, which is the NHS using private diagnostic services, because NHS waiting lists for adult ADHD can run to 7 to 8 years. So it is
disgraceful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so easy to go to the doctors and for the doctor to be dismissive of you and say, oh, it's just part of being a woman. And again, that's why I said before, you're advocating for yourself all the time. You sort of have to build up this. I don't care if the doctor doesn't like me. Again, another massive part of the ADHD for me is people pleasing, and I've got to really try and check myself with that, because it's that wanting to be all things to all people, the part of the masking that I was talking about earlier. So it can be hard to advocate for yourself in that way.
Brilliant. Can I just say a massive thank you, Sarah, for coming on, because I don't think it's easy as well, talking live on these Facebook Lives and on our social media platforms. I know we do public speaking every now and again and stuff like that, but this is completely different. But again, we're freestyling some of this. We wanted it to be a bit more of a natural one, isn't it? Which doesn't come easy to us. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. So now we're going to move on. Thank you, Sarah. We're just going to move on to another segment now. And so this segment is around our members' rights around neurodiversity and reasonable adjustments in the workplace. So what we have Austin Harney, he works in the Office of the Public Guardian, and that looks after the money of mentally incapacitated clients. And obviously, Austin is in PCS, and he represents members up to Employment Tribunal, and especially in disability discrimination. Austin's been a very big advocate around disability discrimination and another member of our Disabled Members Forum. So I'm going to hand over to you, Austin, for you to go through your stuff and hopefully let people know what members' rights are, especially around reasonable adjustments in the workplace. So thanks and welcome, Austin.
Hi, Beth, and thank you very much. I hope you can all see me very clearly. I've just got to try and get the screen right for all of you, if that's correct, as long as Ramona is happy. But well, can you all see me? If everybody's happy with that, I don't suppose anyway, not to worry. What I'll do is I'll just carry on about reasonable adjustments. It's for neurodivergent people. Just the first thing I wanted to make quite clear, that I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 4. And it was very brutal in those days. Nobody even heard of the word autism. It didn't become well known until that film The Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman. And still people didn't really have a very strong understanding of what autism really was. But I'm saying quite clearly it was like, growing up in North AD, really, to be honest with you. And I was actually used to work in the divorce registry. This is a long time ago. I'm almost giving away my age now. But it was 1991 and I was sacked in 1992. Now, in those days, there was no such thing as reasonable adjustments. They didn't come out until the Disability Discrimination Act of 1995. And it wasn't until 2004 that an autistic person's employment was declared unlawful in the Hewitt versus Motorola case of 2004. That was a long legal battle. But anyway, just as I begin, and I think this is really important that we promote this within the trade union movement, and we promote this as much as we can within PCS. So just kindly bear with me for a second, and I'll just go through the list of reasonable adjustments for neurodivergent people. So you'll kindly just bear with me for 1 second. I won't be too long. Right. Well, first of all, the two most important things as far as, in terms of introduction. What did I want to point out? Sorry, just going through the issues here. The two most important things for reasonable adjustments for neurodivergent people. The first one is making the most of someone's strengths. And the second point is support the things that they find more difficult. Because in reality, a lot of employers are very ruthless. Managers really go for an employee's weakness as part of their career advancement. This should never be the case for a neurodivergent person. They need as much support as they possibly can. And just as I proceed, number 2 is concentration. Now, adjustments that could help an employee to concentrate include noise cancelling headphones, fidget toys, a standing desk, regular breaks throughout the day, a quiet place to work away from distractions. Now, that is important. I certainly need to have a quiet space when I need to concentrate. And I'll just also give an example. An employee who has I'll just say ADHD because I don't really believe in using the word disorder, but who works in a call center, they use a standing desk, for example, to help them work off energy and improve focus. The third point is written communication. Now, adjustments that could help with written communication include software to support with reading or writing, for example, a screen reader or a speech-to-text program. Another one is talking through written information. Another point, breaking down instructions into clear steps. There's also using different coloured backgrounds for documents and signs, and also having extra time to read information and complete tasks. So I'll give an example. A construction worker is dyslexic and autistic. They ask for safety signs to be printed on a green background. They find these easier to read and focus. But as for myself, it was very, very difficult for me to process information. When someone was giving instructions to me as a child, it was almost like listening to a foreign language I couldn't really understand. And I could only just pick it up by perceptions, which wasn't easy. So I didn't really fully understand it at all. But written communication for me in this age is really important, and it really does help out enormously. And I would strongly recommend that. Right, the fourth point is organisation and time management. Adjustments that could help an employee to organise their time include regular check-ins on how work is going, planners that visually highlight things like deadlines and appointments, extra reminders, breaking work up into smaller tasks, having extra time to plan out work. So, for example, an employee working in a garage is dyspraxic and has ADHD. They use a colour-coded wall planner to help them break down tasks. They have a 10-minute check-in with their boss each morning to go through the plan for the day. Number 5, sensory overload. So sensory overload is when someone feels they cannot cope because their senses are overwhelmed. For example, by loud noises or strong smells. Adjustments that could help reduce sensory overload include a private, quiet space to go to, changes to dress codes or uniforms, for example, to allow for softer materials or calmer colors, noise cancelling headphones, computer screen filters to reduce brightness, and having early warning of changes at work and extra time to process them. So, for instance, a change in the organisation can have an impact on someone who's neurodivergent. They need more support. And I'll give an example. A teaching assistant in a school is autistic. They are told about changes to the curriculum in advance and given time out of lessons to go over the changes. As I go to number 6, poor balance or coordination. Right, adjustments that could support with poor balance or coordination include specialist equipment, for example, a different keyboard or mouse that's easier to use. Organising spaces carefully, for example, avoiding clutter. Signs giving clear directions around the workplace. For example, an employee who is in an off license is dyspraxic. They ask for the storeroom to be organised so that nothing is left on the floor, and shelves are arranged so that everything is easy to get to. As I was saying, supporting strengths is number 7. Right, so employers should explore with neurodivergent employees how they can use their strengths at work. For example, working with clients if someone has strong verbal communication skills, finding opportunities for creative thinking, identifying areas of work that particularly interest an employee. It's good practice to take this approach with all employees. During this, we'll also support neurodivergent employees who have not shared their condition. Now, number 8, of course, there are some negative points I need to point out, which are absolutely dreadful, but they are important because they must be avoided in terms of agreeing reasonable adjustments with anybody who's neurodivergent. One of the negative points I want to point out is burnout. Neurodivergent employees are more likely to experience burnout at work. Being burnt out means extremely tired or exhausted, so you no longer feel able to work. Burnout can cause increased absence and poor performance. Employers should consider what support can help avoid this. For example, extra breaks or varying types of work. And I, for myself, for example, to concentrate for long hours can be very, very exhausting indeed. Learning to work twice as hard as everybody else. And sometimes one does need a space. And it's important that people with neurodivergent conditions, they do need a space from work, a break from work, especially for stimming purposes as well. This is something that many people in mainstream society never understood. They had a very prejudicial view to people who were stimming. But I just wanted to make that point clear. I also wanted to make clear as well on the negative side, which again we have to avoid, is the failure to make reasonable adjustments. If an employer does not make reasonable adjustments, this could be disability discrimination. Well, it definitely is. This type of disability discrimination is called failure to make reasonable adjustments. Failing to make reasonable adjustments might damage an employee's relationship with their employer, affect an employee's performance at work, and also lead to increased sick absences. In some circumstances, an employer could feel like they have no choice but to resign. If this is the case, they might consider making a claim for constructive dismissal. I also want to talk about mental health support. Now, neurodivergent employees might experience mental health problems related to their condition. From my own experience, this is more about being discriminated against, which drove me to very high levels of mental depression when I was a teenager. But just as I get back to the detail, a lack of support from the employer could make this worse and affect their performance at work, as I've just said earlier, again, lead to increased sickness absence. For example, not being able to wear noise cancelling headphones could cause anxiety for some employees with ADHD. Employers should consider how to support an employee with any mental health problems as well as with their condition. Doing this can help improve an employee's performance and productivity. That last sentence is very, very important. How we help an employee perform and do well, be productive for the organisation. Just a couple of last points. The last point I wanted to point out was other examples of reasonable adjustments. Paid time off when needed, fixed hours rather than variable shifts, reducing specific sensory stimuli in the workplace, for example, locating individuals' workstation in a quieter or less bright part of the office, A change of work location, for example, to be nearer home or nearer support facilities, or to work to a location which is quieter or less overstimulating. Extra breaks to enable relaxation, providing a mentor, individual support where schedules are unavoidably disrupted and when changes are introduced, adjustments to the way in which assessments are carried out, a clear routine and work schedule, a personal workstation rather than sharing a workstation or hot desking, specific tools to aid work organisation, such as a visual timetable or organiser app, relaxation of triggers for disciplinary action for matters such as sickness, absence, or mistakes arising from executive function impairment, additional training time off for treatment appointments as part of a policy for disability leave, reallocating some work to colleagues with their agreement. I just want to finally point out that it's important that people do go for occupational health referrals if they have a neurodivergent condition, but it's just not enough to see the specialist. What they actually need is a therapist to assess their condition as well, and to see what adequate reasonable adjustments that management or the employers can provide. I know that time is running out, but I just think that's very important. I think we in the trade union need to build on this as well. It's not good enough having laws or policies. We need to put them into practice. And I just wanted to make quite clearly, I personally am a great believer in personal case training on neurodiversity. I think we should have more reps to be trained on this and challenge the prejudices of employer and management. So I want to conclude solidarity to all of you.
Thank you ever so much, Austin. And I think that's been really worthwhile just to go through those types of reasonable adjustments and also those people's rights as well. And I completely agree with you around the training, especially around personal cases, but also we've got to keep in a little while as well to go through those other courses that we do have. So thanks again for that, Austin. And so what we're going to do now, everybody, is actually show a video. I did say we would have a couple of real life experiences around what it's been like for people in the workplaces, in civil service, and our PCS members. So now we're going to show you a brief video from Paula. Paula's a PCS member, and she's going to talk about her issues that she's encountered at work for being neurodivergent. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Paula and I work for MOD, and I have been a civil servant now for 15 years. I have ADHD, autism spectrum condition and dyslexia, as well as a number of other labels. In 2017 I damaged my back and was in a great deal of pain. I was on extremely strong painkillers, and as somebody with ADHD, I had developed over the years a number of coping strategies and did a lot of masking. When you are in pain, it is much harder for you to maintain those masking strategies. And when you are anxious and stressed, it's even harder. So when I was trying to get reasonable adjustments implemented for my back problem, my ADHD became a struggle. And I was being gaslit and challenged by my line managers every term. I was extremely anxious. I was at one point suicidal, and I was begging for help and I wasn't getting it. And I was then diagnosed with autism and dyslexia. And I think for me, the support of my union rep was absolutely huge. I think without that, I would have been in a very, well, I was in a very dark place, but I possibly wouldn't have been here. So I think my message as a neurodivergent is, when you've met one person with a neurodivergent condition, you've met one person with a neurodivergent condition. The important thing is to talk to people, to understand how you can support them, and that implementing appropriate adjustments in the most effective and efficient way is going to minimise the impact of neurodivergent conditions on people's mental health and enable them to be more effective in the workplace and reduce absence through sickness and stress. And adjustments are supportive, but they're not a cure. So there will be times when people struggle, even with adjustments in place. And I think it's important that that's recognised. My conditions aren't an excuse, they're an explanation. And I am now in a role where I have extremely supportive line management, and I am absolutely thriving. I am loving my job, and I think that I am respected and appreciated as a valuable member of staff. But that isn't the same for a lot of people. And I think we need to work hard as a community to make sure that we support people with adjustments where possible, because the impact on mental health of failing to do so is probably the key contributor to absence through poor mental health. And I think the support of the union and the support of line management and colleagues is critical. And there is so much stigma attached to neurodivergent conditions and the impact that those can have in the workplace, when actually, if we are supported appropriately, we can be such valuable members of staff and provide a perspective on challenges in the workplace that others simply don't see. So thank you for watching. Take care of yourself and take care of the people that you work with. Thank you.
Wasn't that brilliant? And that was Paula giving her experiences in the workplace. And obviously, the theme for this event is to celebrate, learn and empower. And hopefully we're doing all of that. So don't forget, if you like what you're watching and you think it's worthwhile, every single person, whether you're on whatever platform you're on, please keep sharing this, because people can watch it afterwards as well, especially around the empowerment stuff. So what I'm going to do next is our last segment, really, and that's around the learning aspect as well. I'm very keen on developing activist reps and all members as well. So what I'm going to do now is bring in Keith Johnston. So he's appeared on our screen. And Keith is Head of Education and Learning in PCS. He's worked for PCS for 18 years, probably known him about that long as well, in a variety of organising, bargaining and campaigning roles. And previously was a union rep for Unite, T&G and Unison in the social housing sector. Keith's responsible for delivering over 150 courses per year for PCS reps in partnership with FE colleges and other providers that we use. In 2024, PCS Academy launched the Branch Learning Fund, which aims to expand education opportunities for all members, and that's whether that be online and in the workplace. So I'm going to hand over to Keith now to explain a few bits about our courses that we run, and hopefully if you're a member, you can sign up for these as well. If you're a rep and you haven't got them, please see the links in the comments aside as well, or speak to your branch or your groups for any further information. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bev. And I will try and keep this to 10 minutes. I'm mindful that everyone must be very tired after a very exciting but quite long event into the evening. So, and thanks for staying with us. Please do stay with us for the last 10 minutes. Yes, PCS is very, very proud that we've been at the forefront of union training on neurodiversity since I think it's about 2017. We got Janine on board. She wrote and delivered the course. We've now got Manchester College, another great tutor called Michelle Graham, who delivers our neurodiversity training as well. So I've been putting in the chat some of the details and hopefully some of the actual links for some upcoming courses will go in there as well. So I don't know if Ramona, you can just pop back 3. I think we've gone. That's it. Yep. Next slide, please. Thanks. So the first course I want to talk about is our stage 1 course. This is a 3-day course. We go into all of the things that Janine and others have been talking about in terms of what a union rep and, well, a member needs to know about neurodiversity in the workplace. So all the stuff about social model of disability, issues you may face at work, the role of the union, how we can assist members who need help, what makes an accessible workplace, telling neurodivergent members their rights, etc. So a very, very good 3-day course that is a very good introduction to neurodiversity issues for trade unionists. So we encourage everyone on this course, on this session to sign up if you haven't already done that. Next slide, Ramona. So there is also now a stage 2 course. So if you've been on the stage 1 course, you want more information, you want more to learn a bit more, then please do sign up for the stage 2. Again, another 3 days. So really thorough training that we offer. More detailed case studies there. Position of neuroatypical workers in the workplace and wider society we'll look at, particularly in the economic and political context we face at the moment. And also a bit more on employment and welfare rights for neurodivergent members. Next slide, please. We also, if you're not sure or if you want to spread the word to members in your workplace, we also offer taster sessions, so bite-sized 1-hour sessions in the lunchtime. We offer them nationally as well as regionally on the website, on our course links that we've put in the chat. There'll be another set basically being advertised very shortly. That gives a good flavour of like our courses, but please do encourage people to sign up for those sessions as well, because they're a good kind of way in to get the longer training. Next and final slide, Ramona. To dig a bit deeper in your branch, we can actually deliver those sessions through Learning Fund. So we've again put links in the chat how to access the branch Learning Fund. So if you're a union learning rep or other workplace rep or a branch officer, you can apply for your branch to have those sessions delivered in your branch online. So again, Janine and Michelle, people can come into your branch, deliver those online and give a good training is on offer. So that, Bev, is a summary of what we offer. As I say, all the links have been put there in the chat, so please do sign up. And today the summer course has been announced, the summer courses rather, for PCS Academy. So there's lots of new dates available for signing up from today.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that, Keith. I mean, I think probably one of the first year or so, the Neurodiversity in the Workplace 1 training, and then did the second one. And I can't say how much that I was able to represent members better in my workplace, even though I'm somebody with a neurodivergent condition. It helped me understand and be able to represent those members in the workplace a lot better. But also, I know in my own experience that even members in our branches have had time off to attend these courses as well. And so we can make sure that we facilitate that for members as well, can't we? So I do think it's really worth having a look through the Academy book. Make sure that, as Sarah said earlier, there's other courses, and I know, Keith, you've put it in the chat as well, around menopause, around all different things that we can do short courses for, because that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we empower everybody, members and reps and activists alike, to make sure that they have that knowledge, because obviously knowledge is power, And that's how we can all make our workplaces better for all of our members. So I am going to wrap up now. I've got a couple of minutes here left to wrap up. So there's a couple of things I want to probably say. And that is, first of all, again, if you've enjoyed this, hopefully you have, please make sure that you share it on X and on Facebook. You can share it. Everyone can still see it, and they can read anything that we've put in the comments as well, so that people can click on the links. The other issue is around for any members wanting to get involved in our equality networks. So if anybody logs on to PCS Digital, you can have a look on the equality thing. You can sign up for equality networks and become involved that way, even if you're a member and you're not an active rep of that kind at the moment. Please get involved. I think it's really important that we engage with you and we continue to engage with you. If you don't know how to contact your rep and you feel as though you do need some support, again, if you go onto PCS Digital, there is a link on there, Find My Rep, and you can have a look that way. Most branches do have equality officers, but some obviously are still not online yet on that detail. But please get in touch. If you struggle at all, or there's any other information you need that we haven't given you or you can't find, then please email us at equalities@pcs.org.uk. So in a few moments, we're gonna end with a last slide, which has just got some organisations that we can point you in the direction to get any support if you need it. It is in the comments, the links, but this will just be a slide to do that. But before I do go, I just want to say one big thank you, because we wouldn't have this event if we didn't have the members in our National Disabled Members Forum supporting us, putting this working group together, bringing this out, but also we wouldn't have this event without everybody else behind the scenes. So I just want to thank all of those participants firstly today. So we've had Sarah, who's an NEC and DWP GEC member, Janine Booth, who delivers our training and does a lot of other training for other trade unions, April, our PCS member, who won a fantastic result in her tribunal, Paula on the video, again, thank you for sharing, Paula. Ossian, who's part of our forum, again, thank you for talking about the reasonable adjustments, and Keith around all of that education and learning. As I said, we wouldn't be able to do these events, one, without you guys, so please keep in touch and keep listening to us, but two, we wouldn't be able to do this without the people behind the scenes. So I want to say a massive thank you to Ramona for helping us through this, massive thank you to Di Banks in our equality section, and Diane Shepherd, and also a massive thank you to Caroline Brown, who helps me chair and organise the National Disabled Members Forum. And last of all, thank you ever so much, Richard, for interpreting our BSL for us and supporting our members that need that on these requirements. We have had several lunchtime events, and we will be having more soon. So please keep in touch. Please look out for anything to do with our National Disabled Members Forum. And thank you so much for participating and watching today. We'll leave it with the link. And Ramona, thank you again for seeing us through this. These are the different links of organisations that offer support, and they might be helpful to you or to your members. So again, thank you ever so much for tuning in tonight. And hopefully it's not been too long for all of you. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you.